He's been playing like a man possessed. Rusty also took it one step further this week.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show. Welcome back.
Oh, welcome back, everybody. And that little voice in the beginning says so much to talk about. And there is not necessarily a lot of international rugby, but certainly a focus on the international game, I think, over the last couple of weeks and indeed days. We've got plenty to talk through. Sanzaar just came out with a calendar. So I think people are a little bit more attuned to what the big plan is for the medium term, at least. What it might be for the long term, well, only time will tell. But at least we know what's going to happen with the Rugby Championships. We know in terms of tours, at least for now, what the plans are. And it looks like it's going to be a busy couple of years. But Sim, always good to catch up. We've been talking about, it seems to have been a theme for us this year, this talk of a global season. And this feels to me like we're inching towards that. We're heading in that direction. It's not necessarily a done deal, but the talk of player welfare, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well, especially with our guest. And then obviously this calendar that's been released by Sanzaar at least helps us know what we are in for the next few years.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's nice to know what Sanza's plans are because Sanza's also in the habit of of dropping people without telling them that they're dropping them. I remember how the Super Rugby thing went all those years ago. Yeah. So it's always nice when they actually go, you know what, guys, for the next 5 years, this is what's happening. Obviously, I think the most notable thing out of that whole calendar that they released was the fact that there is no Rugby Championship next year, obviously because of the tour between of New Zealand's tour to South Africa as part of the Rugby's Greatest Rivalry tour. So when they so they come through here next year, play 8 matches, I think it is. Well, it's actually 7 matches in South Africa because it's against the 4 URC sides, and then 3 tests against the Boks. And the 4th test is at a neutral venue, probably Twickenham or some such other place where they can spend a bit of money, And then obviously we reciprocate in 2030. So it now says the Rugby Championship, which ironically probably had its best season ever this year, will now take a pause. That's probably something we're going to have to talk about, amongst ourselves with our guest. And then obviously it's going to be on for 2027, 2028 and 2029, and then again goes on a pause in 2030. So look, I mean, it's nice to have sort of everything out there and put out, and like you say, it does make some implications about which direction the world game is going, as in do we finally get that holy grail of of a global season. And I genuinely hope it's going in that direction. I'm going to tell you a bit later what Rusty's thoughts are on that, because he's another one who's sort of he's got ideas about how he would like to see it happen. But yeah, we probably should introduce our guest. No.
We should. I also want to touch on the Nations Championships, which is probably the one thing in that calendar which suggests that we are edging towards a global, at least one global calendar. But our guest knows all about touring in New Zealand, but I know that his playing days came after New Zealand tours were no longer really a thing. Pat Lambie, what an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time, Pat. It's good to see you. And Sim said it just before we came on. You look like you could still be running out, this Saturday for the Sharks in preparation for the end of year tour. If things had gone according to plan, I reckon you'd still be around. Do you feel that way? Do you feel like, what are you, 35? You'd still be playing?
Yeah, how's it, X? And Sim, thanks very much for having me on your show. Obviously, I had dreams and ambitions of playing until I was in my mid-30s, if not my late 30s. Some of my role models, the likes of Johnny Wilkinson, Ronan O'Gara, those players all had extended careers well into their mid to late 30s. But that was the hand that I was dealt. Thanks for passing the compliments, though. I'll take them. And Yeah, very happily in a new career, family man, and a huge rugby fan now.
Yeah, I'm always interested in how former rugby players, professionals, watch the game of rugby or engage with it. But you managed to keep in the game because you coached a bit, and I know you were involved with the Sharks for a bit. So before actually breaking away, at least you got to sort of taper off your time in the game. Do you think that made the transition easier for you?
Yes, I do. So I was the kicking consultant for a couple of years at the Sharks, just before COVID came around, and it was an invitation that was extended to me by Sean Everett, who was the coach at the time and had been my coach through junior levels and Currie Cup and Super Rugby at the Sharks. And it was certainly part of my healing, obviously being torn away from the game and dealing with the disappointment of not being able to play anymore. To have the connection with the Sharks and to feel like every time I went in there for the odd session with the goal kickers, it felt like I was going home again and having a taste of that professional rugby environment. All that being said, the coach bug did not bite. It hasn't bitten me yet. And so, as it stands, very happy to be passing my comments in the comfort of my living room off the couch when we watch the Sharks and the Springboks.
Yeah, no, you're a well-behaved boy. I'm sure those viewings are calmer than in a lot of ex-Springboks houses. Pat, I've heard some incredible language used by people who I thought didn't get emotional about the game of rugby. I always thought with rugby players, you guys are very analytical about the game. That you stay quite calm and measured about it. And is that been your experience when you look at your former teammates and how you do engage with the game? And then some will jump in after this.
Yeah, there definitely are a handful of ex-teammates, ex-players who let their emotions get the better of them when they're watching and supporting. Yeah. And I like to think that maybe they were the ones on the field that tended to get a little bit hot-headed at times as well. But in general, it's more of an analytical eye, like you say. I think we have a genuine understanding of the game and can appreciate the nuances and the tactics and the techniques of different players, which probably dominates the conversation, along with the passion more than the emotion, I'd like to think.
Pat, I know I said you look like you could still jowl, but in doing a bit of research this afternoon, I don't know if Wikipedia is right or not, but it suggests that it's your birthday tomorrow. It's your 35th birthday. Is that right?
That's correct, Sim.
Well spotted.
Oh, thanks for holding out on us. Because we were talking a bit earlier about, obviously it being one of your kids' birthday today and you taking them out. So what's a big plan for tomorrow?
I've actually got a game of golf lined up with there's 3 4 balls playing, so a group of friends, and then a nice dinner out with most of them and our wives tomorrow evening.
Is that all they allow you to do these days? Just a golf day?
Yeah.
No, it's a nice way to spend the afternoon with friends out on the golf course, and then spend the evening with friends and partners, well, my wife and friends' partners, and have a good time. No kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
nice.
Okay. Don't push it too hard. Don't push it too hard. Yeah. Enjoy the freedom. But Pat, now obviously talking. Sorry.
I was going to take
Pat
ahead. Back to when that hair was was all sort of blonde curls in 2010. The first time we kind of like came into contact with this guy. We out there minding your own business. And I think you look at the SA under 20s, and they've got 2 players in there, one playing fullback and one playing 10. 2 totally different guys. You couldn't get 2 more different guys. One was Pat, the other one was Elton Yankees, if I'm not mistaken. And they somehow got away to play both of them in the same team. I mean, just talk us through that progression, like 1 minute playing under 20s, the next one handing off Skulk famously to win the Currie Cup the same year. Just talk us through, I mean, that incredible start, obviously as a 20-year-old to your career.
Yeah, 2010 was a roller coaster. I mean, started off being included in the Sharks Super Rugby squad at the beginning of the year and traveled to Australia and New Zealand for a 5-week tour right at the start of the season, thinking, I was going to hold some tackle bags and make up the numbers as an extra. And the Sharks went north from 5 in their first 5 games, 2 home games, then 3 of the first 5 tour games we'd all lost. So I think John Plumtree at the time was like, you know what, stuff this, let's make some changes and throw a few youngsters into the mix. And there I was, I got a crack at fullback. And the Sharks then, we had a change of fortune and we ended up winning 7 of the next 8 games and almost made the playoffs in that Super Rugby season. And that led straight into the S Under 20, the Rugby World Cup, the Under 20 World Cup in Argentina. Yeah, we had a cracking team. CJ Thunder was our captain. Elton Yankees was the fly half. Louis Schroeder was the scrum half. Trying to think who else was on our team. Sia Kolisi was on loose forward. And so, I played fullback. We managed to make it to the semis where we lost, I think we lost to New Zealand in a semi-final, but then came good in a third, fourth playoff. And then straight into a Currie Cup with the Sharks, and that team was given the freedom to run the ball from everywhere, score tries from underneath our own posts, express ourselves, and it's really easy to look good and to have your confidence grow when you're playing in a team that is winning and playing in an attractive brand of rugby and one that suits your style. And so, that led to us winning the Currie Cup, and I think there were 8 or 9 Sharks players included in that end of year tour at the end of that season. And as usual, the franchise team, the domestic team that's winning and playing the most cohesive rugby together, the individuals in that team look good and often end up getting selected for the Springboks, and I was one of them. So yes, 2010 was just a crazy year. It was from one thing to the next, and by the time we got home for Christmas, really had to look around my family. We were all just pinching ourselves to everything that had transpired in that year.
Yeah, geez, I remember so much of 2010. I remember the Super Rugby final in Soweto. I remember the Springboks playing a game in Witbank, if I'm not mistaken, and you guys going through to Loftus to go and watch some Soccer World Cup as well. I jumped onto the bus for that little trip, but it was a memorable year. But it was such a busy year, and I remember that at Tri Nations that year ended with the Springboks at the airport, I think it was in Auckland, and trying to delay the plane from getting onto the flight because the World Cup final was on. Spain was playing. I think we were busy leaving New Zealand at the time. It was such a topsy-turvy, really, really hectic year. But I suppose as a youngster, and you were young at that stage, you wanted to live that life. I mean, there was so much happening, so much just excitement. It felt like there was a lot of change, especially with the Soweto games and stuff. So I don't know if you remember that, with the trains going up and down, it just felt like we were on the cusp of something that never necessarily quite materialized, but it was hella exciting.
Absolutely. South Africa was vibrant that year, obviously, with hosting the Soccer World Cup, but also Super Rugby stadiums were full week in and week out. Loftus, Newlands, Kings Park, they were all chock-a-block. Ellis Park, almost every Super Rugby game in that season, certainly that we experienced, was 30, 40, 50,000 people at a time. And being young, obviously just taking everything in, absorbing it all, saying yes to everything, full of energy, full of exuberance, sky's the limit. And it was just a really, really, really special year.
Well, we talked about this new calendar that's been released. Let's take a look at it, because I think Paul's got it for us in the background. And I was asking you, or intended asking you, Patrick, you never really did the long-term type tours that they used to have back in the day. What's the longest rugby tour that you can remember going on?
Longest tour was 6 weeks.
Sure, that's quite long. When was that?
We so 2010 we did a 5-week tour, and then I guess probably doesn't necessarily count as a 6-week tour, but we did a end of year tour, was 5 games, but we had a week's training camp prior to that, so I was away from home for 6 weeks on the trot.
And your take on the New Zealanders coming to South Africa for a full-on rugby tour? I think it's exciting for the purist. It's exciting for people who used to watch it back in the day. I'm quite excited to see how they go against and who they give a run to, especially if you've got a, quote, dirt trackers team. I love that sort of thing, and giving players who aren't necessarily internationals the opportunity to play against some of the best in the world. What do you reckon about this tour? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think that, the British and Irish Lions get the chance to go and experience these long tours in South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, but South Africa, New Zealand, Australia never get the chance to do the same thing, really. Having said that, I do feel like we've had our fair share of fixtures against New Zealand in the last few years, and thankfully we seem to be winning more than 90% of the games against them as it stands. Yeah, but again, looking to the fact that we don't play against them domestically anymore, it will mean that they're bringing a big squad of their players over, playing against all of our franchises. I think rugby fans in South Africa are going to love that. And it seems like every test South Africa and New Zealand play is a humdinger. So, I'm sure that test series is going to be hotly contested and will be well supported. And interesting that you mentioned earlier, Sim, this was the most hotly contested Rugby Championship that we can recall, certainly since Argentina joined the fray. And we're going to be left wanting more of it for another 2 years, I guess, because next year it gets put on the back burner. But it is an interesting way of keeping us all on our toes and fans guessing. And I assume that it's New Zealand. Yeah, you mentioned it, X. It's New Zealand to us, and then we return the favour in 2030. I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
And also, I think for a young player breaking onto the scene now, that's 5 years away. That could be the tour of a lifetime, to go and spend 6 or 7 weeks in New Zealand playing against their franchise team and then against the All Blacks. That would be incredible.
Sim, do you know who I feel sorry for? It's the guys who don't play for one of the big franchises. Like I'm thinking of Jimmy Stonehouse's boys, or, Francis Staines guys in the Free State. There'll be one or two guys who will think, oh, man, the opportunity or so close to the opportunity. And I think I'm being naughty in asking this question because I'm maybe preempting what I think might happen, in that there might be one or two little loans, short-term loans that might happen from some of the smaller unions. I don't know. I kind of hope so, because you also don't want the All Blacks to come through, whether it's an All Blacks 15 or whatever it is, and just run roughshod and 80 points up against whatever franchise, in a midweek game is not necessarily what the fans want to see either. You want to at least not necessarily think you're going to go and beat the All Blacks, but score a try, get some the fans celebrating, be competitive. So a little bit naughty of me to preempt it, but it would be nice to see. There are a couple of guys who deserve the chance.
Actually, it's not naughty at all. The thing is that Rassie was asked in the sort of launch press conference. He was asked if he was going to release his Springboks to go play for their URC franchises, and he, although he sounded like he was open to it, he said, "Look, I think we're going to have a squad of 36 people with us throughout that whole time." And you know how the Boks these days, they love training by themselves because they believe that their training is at an intensity that is probably even higher than than matches, and so they like to keep their players together in a group instead of actually having them sort of get match fitness or whatever. But he did say, look, if 5 guys or so have just come back from injury or haven't played in a long time, we might release them. But what that then means is all those teams are either left with a whole host of youngsters, maybe under 20s or whatever it is, or like you say, they then, this other door opens for those loans where, look, the Sharks already have a relationship with the Pumas. A lot of the Pumas players do get loaned to the Sharks. Western Province or the Stormers have actually taken a few Griquas players on loan. So there are relationship, like pre-existing relationships already. So those guys actually might reach out to them anyway. Look, I'm just grateful on behalf of the All Blacks that, and I think Pat might attest to this, that the poor guys don't have to play in Nelspruit or in Kimberley, where like
Kimberley.
it's not nice there. The grass is not lush. But
Should be sending them there.
yeah, we probably should. Yeah, but yeah, it's not nice. So I feel I feel almost happy for them that they don't have to do it. But I think actually, I know you were saying it tongue in cheek. Actually, it might actually end up happening simply because the box won't really be sort of like available.
Yeah. They won't be available for those teams.
Sorry, X. Yeah, I think we should be drawing on the best players in the country outside of the 30 or 36 that are kept in the Springbok group to represent our domestic sides. So if we do bolster up our franchises with the few best players from Pumas, Griquas, Cheetahs, all the teams who don't have fixtures lined up against New Zealand, I think we should go for it.
You also mentioned that of late we have managed to get the better of the All Blacks in terms of results, and I wonder what the thought must be amongst the big heads at New Zealand Rugby. I'm sure when the plans came about, they thought, okay, well, this is going to be a great tour. We'll be competitive. In 2025, they must be looking at it and thinking, oh, we don't necessarily want to go to South Africa and take a series sort of whitewash or anything like this. I don't want to get ahead of myself, and I know that we shouldn't. But it really is fascinating at how, the power, the dynamic has shifted. Are you surprised, Pat, when you look at, you played only a couple of years ago, it really wasn't too long ago, to what we have now in terms of the number of wins the Springboks are able to get over a team like the All Blacks? No performance has been perfect so far this season, and we've spoken about it. Rassie still saying perfect 80-minute performance, so they've got plenty to play for still. But are you surprised at just how much development has happened since 2018? It's a relatively short space of time.
Yeah, I think it's just been phenomenal, the depth that we've created in all positions, the aura that we have around the Springboks, the brute physicality that we've always had now being complemented with our tactical nous and our out of the box thinking and game plan and mixing things up, and the bomb squad and 8 or 7-1 and 6-2 splits off the bench, and just like we've got the whole world looking at us, wondering what we're going to do next, and trying to keep up with the trends that we are creating as a Springbok group. So it's awesome to see, and it's awesome to be a supporter of the Springboks right now.
I touched on this Nations Cup, having the Six Nations teams involved, the 4 Super Rugby sides as well, maybe Japan, and who knows which other, perhaps a Fiji is what I'm hearing. And it almost feels like they're talking about a mini World Cup, but just, in series form. What do you think of that? I quite like it because it means that we're starting to move towards one international rugby window, which, I hope is the long-term plan.
So what I like about it is that it doesn't, that they're not bringing in a competition that's going to add to what we've got already, like another competition. It's a competition that's going to replace the sort of incoming tours. When I say incoming, I mean into the Southern Hemisphere and into the Northern Hemisphere, i.e. end of year tour, or what used to be the June tours, which is now really July these days. So essentially that's what it's replacing. And the way it's wired, it's sort of like 6 teams up north, which is the Six Nations, obviously. And then 4 teams down here, which is the Rugby Championship sides, plus Fiji and Japan, as you say, which ironically are apparently the last two automatic qualifiers anyway. So actually, you've got the right teams in that sense. So those guys kind of like play against one another. They play against one another in July, um, up north and down south, and then they play against one another again in there's like you've got a southern hemisphere conference and a northern hemisphere conference. Those guys play each other in July and in November. Same thing down here, and then whoever's top then gets to contest almost like a final in the last week of the international window in November. So it's not like it's replacing, it's not like it's kind of like adding on to what's happening. It's just maybe giving a little bit more meaning to the bilateral tours, where usually you'd probably get like like tired teams from up north coming down here in July because it's the end of their season, or you're getting tired teams from down south going up north because it's the end of their season. So at least it kind of like, I think it's that I also like it for that. But then, like you say, it is a situation of edging ever closer to a to a global season. So Rassi was asked again about the Rugby Championship, what it all means, and he basically said, look, what I would like to see now, kind of like one step further, is a Rugby Championship taken, playing in February as well, alongside the Six Nations. Then he says, if we can get that right, everyone's pretty much aligned in terms of where you at in terms of your season. Like everyone's kind of like on the same season and everyone is aligned. Now, if you're talking about, and then he even used an example that the ELVs, the experimental sort of law variations, could all go at the same time instead of getting some of them in the Six Nations and then getting some of them in the championship and then trying to marry them in November. So there's a lot of that kind of talk, and people are getting freer and freer to talk about it. Now you need, obviously, the head administrators to agree to that first, and then secondly, and probably most importantly, you need the money guys to agree to that, because everyone's so married to where sort of the windows of the commercial deals are, that those might be actually the bigger stumbling blocks that you and I don't think about, because, well, we just want to see teams playing on an equal footing.
Yeah, no, and on that, there's also, I love that you mentioned that comment about perhaps, matches being played in early in the year, whether it's in February or whatever it is. It's just so that we can try and align the calendar. Because the other thing that I know Johan Ackerman spoke about, I think it was last week, he made a comment about the fact that, well, if World Rugby now wants to limit the number of games that elite players are going to be able to play to 30, then there has to be a little bit of, hand taking hand, there has to be a bit of samenwerking, as they say. But before we move on to that player welfare question, which is a very important one, and I'm glad I've got you, Pat, on to talk about it. There is a little video that they released, which I think is just a little way to whet the appetite. I don't know if I can twist Paul's arm and get him to play it for us. Paul. going, man. I like that. I like that. They could have closed it with Pat's kick at Ellis Parks against the All
Yes, they
Blacks. I
could
don't
have.
know.
They
I
could and they should
really,
have.
man, they should have. How much do you think about that? I mean, I saw you, Pat. What was it? A couple of weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago, and we obviously spoke about that moment. But do you sort of look back and smile? Does it feature in your memories?
Only when someone mentions it or talks about it, asks about it, or I happen to see it being played on Supersport. It's not something I wake up every day and sort of pat myself on the back for. I'm just grateful that that
What?
went over.
Every day I would. Every day. Uh,
No, man. I was about to say it. Pat's not being like, he's not being realistic. He's talking about it every day. There
That's
you go.
there you go.
Every
That's
time I
Paul. That's
watch
Paul doing that.
SuperSport, the guy is on and he's talking about it. And I think with each little snippet, the meters are getting further back and further back. It's like,
Yeah.
I know it was from my 10-meter line, my own 10-meter line. No, actually it was the 22. So yeah, no, listen, I would take it for all it's worth. Just to tell an aside,
Claim it.
Eggs, just to tell an aside from you saw that promo that says, "Will you say I was there?" Poor Sia Kolisi was kind of like asked, what he thinks about it, and the tour, and he's like well into his answer. He's talking about, it's going to be so exciting. These guys, they're going to get a sense of South Africa. We're going to get a sense of what they're about as well, other than just. And then Rassi, like at some stage, just like interjects and he says, see, I don't think you're guaranteed. You can't be talking like you're guaranteed to be there next year. I'm like, dude, you can't say that in like an international press conference. And Sia's just like, no. Listen, we'll save that for the one-on-one. But like you gotta love Rusty. You've really gotta
Yeah,
love
no,
Rusty.
but he's like the only one that would. And well, talking about the plans not necessarily being able to be put to fruition. And Pat, we started by talking about the fact that you had long-term plans. Obviously, you took that knock in a game against Ireland, and it was against CJ Stander, who you mentioned in that junior Springbok side as well. An incredible player. I know he's back. He's in the Cape now, and I was trying to get hold of him. I wanted to do a little reunion, but it seems like he's let us down, CJ. But really, really good man, really good player. Have you had a chance to speak to him? I mean, after the event and
Yeah,
after the
several
days
times.
that followed. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, that night, the next day, we traveled on the same airplane as Ireland, saw him again at the airport, and then playing for Racing against Munster a handful of times. Had a drink with him after those fixtures, and saw him at a SA Rugby Legends lunch last year before the Ireland South Africa test in Durban. Yeah, so it's great that he's come back to South Africa to raise his family, and I believe he's got a successful career in project management, property development going, and so yeah, we wish him well.
Oh, I wonder if there's going to be a little collaboration between the Cape and KZN there when it comes to property deals being done. I asked this question, Sim, because when I was at school, it was in a rugby practice. It was the silliest thing. I tackled a guy, I chased him down, and the front of my knee went into the back of his and dislocated his knee. I know it was gory. And David, if you're watching, I'm sorry, bro. Like, I still feel really bad when I think about, how that went down. Was never intentional, much like the CJ, Pat situation. But I felt so terrible, and this was just a lighty, like in grade 11 and standard 9. We weren't serious rugby players. I can't imagine. When it happens to somebody like a Pat, who's got a full-on career, building up in the test caps as well. I think that's why it sticks out in people's minds, is that everybody knows it wasn't intentional. Everyone knows that CJ Stander is a really good rugby player. Everyone knows his dedication, his commitment to the game and the cause. And it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, stuff like that is awful simply because I've always said to anyone, the number one requirement of playing rugby is bravery, and nobody really like kind of like internalizes that. There are obviously other sports where that's literally the number one requirement. Obviously combat sports like MMA and boxing, where like, physicality, or physically you could get hurt. And it does happen that some people are unfortunate in that sense, that their injuries are not sort of stuff that you can sit out for a few months on the sidelines or weeks or whatever. But yeah, it's also what makes rugby in that you've got to switch on aggression at such a like at such short notice, and you almost got to switch it off at equally short notice. But what I wanted to ask Pat was, obviously, I mean, the big talking point in rugby now is how careful sort of referees and the lawmakers are when it comes to head injuries. And I think too many of us are quite blasé about it. And it's couch and keyboard warriors that are kind of like blasé about it, like, no man, the game has gone soft or whatever. Just from the perspective of someone who's had that kind of injury, how important is it that these guys are sort of barking up this tree in particular?
Yeah, the game is the furthest thing from soft that you can find. I think it's got the players are bigger and stronger and faster. The collisions are harder. The intensity is higher, and so it is the furthest thing from soft, even with all the efforts that are being made for player safety. So I'm in full support of the rules. No tackles above shoulder height. If you are making a tackle, you can't be upright. Otherwise, chances are you're going to get a head-on-head collision, or you might get a shoulder to the head and hurt yourself, etc., etc. In full support of taking a player out in the air. You've got to be in a realistic position to catch the ball. I mean, all of these things are making our game safer. And at the end of the day, if we don't look after our players on the field, I think rugby as a sport is going to die, because there'll be less and less mothers letting their boys, their young children, take up rugby as a sport if they see 3 or 4 serious injuries every time there's a rugby match or a professional rugby match on the TV screen. So our players are more brutal and more physical than they ever have been, and so the rules need to protect our players and help make sure that every collision is legal, is a fair contest, and whilst you can dominate your opposition physically, it doesn't necessarily mean that your opposition needs to get hurt and injured.
Pat, how extreme were your symptoms? Because, I mean, in the hopes that there's a young rugby player watching this who thinks maybe it's not that serious. Like Sim says, we do tend to get quite blasé about rugby and, injuries and player safety. What was it quite extreme, or was it just a little feeling, a little thing, just a little headache here and there? What did you actually experience? Because it was quite a long period between when the incident happened to when eventually, after all the advice, you decided the best thing to do is to call it quits.
Look, I think all the protocols around HIAs, concussion, return to play are all extremely necessary, because it's not like when you have a concussion, it's not like getting a bruise on your leg, spraining your ankle, breaking your arm, where you can physically see there is something wrong with you. You get wrapped in a sling when you do your shoulder, you go for a knee operation and you wear a cast and are on crutches for a few weeks, or same with your leg, your ankle. So someone can see, okay, physically there's something wrong, and a concussion is inside your head, and it can be that that maybe there's something physically wrong with your brain, swelling or bleeding, but not necessarily. It can also be that you're suffering from symptoms as a result of the trauma to your brain. And so in my case, I had 2 big concussions in my career, and I had a handful of smaller concussions. And the gist of it is that my threshold absorbing big contact or impact on my head was diminishing, and my symptoms post those incidents were lasting longer and longer each time. So I was suffering from a low-grade migraine permanently. I had sensitive eyes to light. I had no energy, no motivation. If I exercised, I would have a burning sensation in my eyes. And so after my last fixture, after my last game, it took me 18 months to shake all of those symptoms and feel better again. So it's different for everyone. Sometimes it's very easy and simple, and that you have a head knock, you fail your cognitive tests, or you can't walk in a straight line doing your HIA on the side of the field, but you wake up 2 or 3 days later and you feel right as rain, and you go through your return to play protocol, and a week or two later you can be back on the field. But for others, you might get a head knock, feel a bit fatigued, feel a bit thick-headed, feel like every time you try and exert yourself physically, it brings on a headache, and that may take a week or 2 or 3 or 4 to pass. And the frustrating thing for us players, you want to know when you get injured, how long your recovery is going to be and when you can return to play. Well, with a head injury, everyone is different, and it's not as straightforward as, right, you've had a head knock, we'll see you in 2 weeks, or right, you've had a big head knock, we'll see you in 6 weeks. So I guess I've been talking a long time, but maybe for any young players, like you say, X, who are watching, the risk of returning to the field before you have fully recovered from a head injury is that you may pick up another head injury or an injury of some other kind, which I believe there are studies now that say if you are carrying a head injury and you haven't fully recovered, often there's something else in your body that might give, because your brain's not firing at full capacity. So just be cautious if you have had a head knock. And I think it's common knowledge now as well that the repetitive head knocks are far worse than your once-off big ones. It's, if you're getting 2 or 3 or 4 concussions in a calendar year or in a season, then maybe you need to think about taking some time off and giving your brain and your body a chance to truly recover before you take contact again.
Yeah, we make concussions not sound like a serious thing. And our mate Julian is actually asking a question, which is, it's a sensitive one, but I absolutely understand why he makes the connection. Sorry, I'm just reading it off screen here. And he asks, when one reads stories of past players saying that they have early onset dementia, do you worry about your future, considering that concussion history? Or do you think that your actions and quitting when you did probably negates a lot of that concern, that you did what you ought to do, and that's unfortunately a lot of the time a step away?
Yes, I saw a lot of specialists and doctors during my time, and obviously before the decision was made to stop playing, I had advice from doctors from all over the world. And there was one gentleman in the UK who has done a case study. I think it was of over 3,000 patients. A bunch of them were ex-jockeys who'd had multiple concussions, some of them multiple severe concussions falling off their horses. And then obviously a group of people who had never had any head trauma, had never had any car crashes or sport injuries, no concussions at all. And they did all the testing that you could possibly imagine, the MRI brain scans, all the cognitive tests, all the intellectual tests, the tracking of eyes and things. And they had obviously a wide sample population, so of varying ages. And the outcome of that study was that there was no direct correlation between the onset of dementia or any other head brain disease, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or anything like that, if you had multiple concussions versus if you had not. So it was almost like completely random and unconnected, and luck of the draw whether you were going to get early onset dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's or not, based on whether you'd had concussions or not. And So it was that conversation that I had with him and the research from that study that I'm hanging on to. I feel like I did get out, even though physically my body is feeling absolutely fine now and still feel like I'm young enough to still be running around on the field, the thought of having just one more small concussion is not worth it in my opinion. And so I'm grateful that that decision has been made and that it's long in the past and I've come to terms with it, as difficult as it was at the time. And holding on to the fact that I'm 100% now and I'm healthy and well and I'm going to look after myself and hopefully live a long, happy life without having to worry about any long-term impacts from the head injuries that I've had.
Sim?
Pat, just to look back at your career, I mean, obviously, you'll be 35 tomorrow. You've got three kids, aged 5 to 1. You've moved on to construction, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of what you do now. So I mean, life is pretty balanced. I'm just curious. Obviously, having had to retire at 28. How do you look back at your career, specifically, looking back at the fact that it was a career that started in a mad rush at 20. We talk about you at 20 in 2010. There's still 2011. Most of us still remember the forward pass issue from the 2011 World Cup. So, and obviously there was that kick against the All Blacks. There have been so many. You crammed so much into that career, but obviously, no one should be retiring at 28. So I'm just curious, almost from a philosophical perspective, how do you look back at your career?
Yeah, I feel very blessed that I got to cram so much into my first 8 or 9 years, and I feel blessed that I played, at the highest level, got to represent the Springboks. I got to, play for my childhood team, the Sharks, and I also got a stint to play overseas for Racing, which was one of the most enjoyable seasons and a half that I had in my entire career. So. Philosophically, I guess it has taken me a little bit of time to accept it and for the hurt to pass. And even there are still some days now where I still feel disappointment and those thoughts of what could have been do surface. But I'm trying to remember my career. I'm trying to remember all the good times, all the memories that I have, all the friendships I got to make, all the places I got to see, all the experiences that I got to have representing South Africa, representing the Sharks, and I'm holding those memories close to my heart, and I feel very blessed, very grateful, and very proud of those. So that's kind of where we are at the moment.
And Pat, listen, I've got as a guy who's played, who could play 10, 15, and do a job at 12. I've got to ask you the burning question in every South African rugby fan's head: the fly-off situation in the box now. How are you treating that? What do you think? How do you look at what each guy brings? And if gun to your head, somebody's saying, "Listen, you got a final tomorrow. You got to pick one of these guys to start, maybe one of them on the bench, because I imagine you can't have all three in a 23." How are you treating that situation?
Yeah, gun to my head, final tomorrow. I'm picking Sasha, and I've got Andre as cover on the bench. I think, surely a guy like Sasha and the performances that he's put in is the future for us. He's got every attribute under the sun. He's got everything going for him, and he's only going to get better and better as he grows into that role. And then a guy like Andre has been there and done it. He's got all the experience. He's a man for the pressure moment. Will kick those kicks over when we need him to. Can cover 12 as well. Can steady the ship if that's what's required. And then to have Marnie in the squad as well, he has grown immensely and he's playing with such confidence and he seems so unfazed by anything that happens out there, and he can create something from nothing. He's proven his goal kicking of late, and he's a match winner. So I think for our opposition, when they are analysing the Springboks and those three players you can put on the number 10 jersey, it's very difficult for them.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually asked you what your favorite position is between 10 and 15. I know where I used to enjoy watching you play.
10, man. It has to be 10.
I think he'll say that, but I don't know. I'm such a fan of Pat Lambie with the 15 on his back.
Yeah, thanks, X. It's a tricky one because I ended up playing a lot more at fly half because that's where the Sharks used me. And so I felt like I grew into that position, and I loved the responsibility of the decision making and the goal kicking and getting my hands on the ball a lot. Playing in the lion's mouth, in the lion's den. I don't know what the right saying is, but being in the thick of it. But having said that, one of the thoughts that does come up in my mind when I'm thinking about my career is, one of those what if kind of thoughts is, what if I had stuck to fullback and had only played in that position, or what if I had dug my heels in and said, I am a fly half, don't let me play anywhere else. But yeah, I loved being able to play in both. I think it made, for anyone who has to play in more than one position, you have to grow your skill sets. You have to understand the game from a different perspective or different aspects, I guess. I think it improved my play, and I feel grateful that it meant that I could play more tests for the Springboks and be used where I was needed at times.
Yeah, because there's a lacquer, and I need to actually do a bit of research because Pat, having played at Racing, there were some phenomenal fly halves that played at Racing, and I don't know if your time overlapped with any of them. Owen Farrell was there, Dan Carter at a stage, Ollie, what's his name, the English guy. There were a couple of really, really good flowers. Did you ever overlap with any of those guys? Like they were always in with a good 10.
Yeah, they've imported a few good ones. My first season there was Dan Carter's last season.
Right.
The squad that we had in that change room was just outrageous. There were 40 guys in the squad, and I think 25 were international players, either current or past, and the past international players were all legends, like Dimitri Sozewski for France, Yannick Nyanga, French player, and Donica Ryan, Irish lock, and Dan Carter, Joe Rokothoko, all of these chaps. So that
Johnny Sexton
was no. So Johnny Sexton was before Dan Carter, I believe. Okay. So I missed him. Yeah. Ronan O'Gara was our coach though, so he had a big influence on the group, and I loved learning from him.
I was going to ask the experience of playing with with DC as a South African, as a fly-off period. What was that like?
It was very cool to rub shoulders with him and see how he goes about his business. He had suffered from a few injuries that season, so he was in and out of the group and probably wasn't at his best. But obviously, I tried to absorb as much information from him as I could. It was a little bit disappointing that the coaching staff didn't really take all that much input from the players in team meetings and with regards to game plans and strategies. It was a little bit, they gave us the script and we sort of had to follow it. But yeah, obviously the conversations around the dinner table or at lunchtime and in the gym, on and off the training field, I was trying to learn as much as possible from all of those experienced international players, but in particular Dan.
How's your French?
It was okay. I was getting there. We were just out of 2 years there. I probably needed another 2 or 3 years, and now it's gone completely out the window. Years ago.
Yeah, We've kept you so long. It feels like every question opens another potential, kind of worms. There's so much to you, Patrick, and there's so many questions that I still have. So I hope we can do this again soon. But before I let you go, our mate Julian here he's a huge Sharks fan. He can't be helped. And he says there's a question, or it's a comment rather, not really even a question. Kings Park will not host a test match against the All Blacks. The tests are at Ellis Park, Cape Town Stadium, and FNB. Sounds like he's having a whinge.
Yeah.
He's having a whinge. We've seen this before. But how do you feel about that? It's a bit disappointing, though. I'm sure you'd want Kings Park to host a test match at a All Blacks, tour.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after the performance the Springboks have just had at Kings Park against Argentina. So the Durban supporter base were treated to an absolute spectacle. And the players would have had happy memories coming back to Kings Park. But that is what it is. It's curious. What's more curious for me is that it's a 4-match test series, 3 here and 1 in a neutral location. I think it's going to be a real damp squid or wet squid if we draw the series 2-2. I think we need to have an outright winner, don't we?
Yeah, I like that. A full undecided.
I think for these two teams it works out just fine to be all square. Because look, if you take away the 4 matches before Auckland where the Boks won all 4, which is obviously unusual for us. Under Rassie, the Boks and the All Blacks have basically been tit for tat. Like, you win this game, I win the next. You win this game, I win the next. I think they're kind of okay with it. And just looking at the venues that they've chosen for the series, I think Cape Town was probably a New Zealand demand. It's like, listen, we have to play in Cape Town because that's where our proper fan base is.
We need fans.
Ellis Park was probably Rassie's demand. Like, listen, we need one unfriendly place for these guys. And then FNB is just obviously to capitalize on the 90,000 seaters. If you can charge whatever you want for that, you could make so much money. And then obviously you've got to take it overseas. I really can't see them hosting it anywhere else other than Twickenham. Can you?
Mm-mm.
It just makes sense to me. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to think of another place, because where else do you take it?
Where else? Yeah,
exactly.
Anywhere else. Yeah,
maybe
well, except for Chicago. Here we come. Julian's saying the start of France. No.
Guys, we're not having Donald Trump hand out whatever trophy these guys are playing for. Please, not a chance. Not happening. Sorry, guys.
We're hosting a team of refugees. I mean, come on, it could be fun when you think about it. But except the one thing that you said, at some stage you said, you don't think that they'd mind sharing the honors, and Pat gave a little, so it tells me that he's a lot more competitive. He still wants an outright Springbok victory, and I understand why. He's a Springbok legend, Pat Lambie. It's been such a pleasure, man, to have you on. I really, really am grateful for your time. We've taken up a little bit more than I promised you, but you knew what you were getting into.
Thanks for having me, X. Thanks, Sam. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Looking forward to it, Pat. You're absolute legend. Thank you so much for your time. And Sim, we'll catch up on Sunday. We didn't catch up after the last round of URC matches, and sure, things have happened, and it's only the Stormers from a South African point of view that are really looking solid. But last thought, for me, surprised, it was the early team announcement for the weekend. Vodacom Bulls, 11 changes. Has Akka's coming in with a big new broom, sweeping things. Do you think that's what they need?
Look, no, I'm not sure if it's what they need exactly, simply because if you were to look at the Bulls, I think with a new coach, 3 matches in or 3 rounds in, however you want to look at it, one of the obvious things that stick out is that maybe they haven't got cohesion yet. They've still got a few Springboks that they need to reintegrate into the team. So, to make more changes, I imagine it will be difficult to say that's what they need. But maybe it's not what they need in terms of this individual result, but it is what they need in terms of the campaign as a whole. Just to have a look at what it is that they do have and what it is that they don't have, and some of those changes were enforced by the conditions. And when I say conditions, I'm talking there were sort of bumps and bruises, injuries that sort of precluded some of those players from being able to play against Connacht this weekend. But also, there's other small things like, they're going to play in that 4G pitch. So guys with historical sort of bad knees tend to be ruled out of that because of how much harder the surface is than natural grass. And then you've got like other sort of things you can't control, like Andre Pollard Smith is having a baby soon. It's only supposed to be on the 20th, but as you know, babies have a nasty habit of arriving a little early, and then they spend the rest of their lives like kind of like thinking, where was I going? Why was I in such a mad rush? But it's all those things put together where guys are kind of like he was kind of pushed into it, and he does have to have a proper look at what it is that he has and doesn't have. It's just that you hope that one thing I didn't like about the Bulls was the president coming out and kind of like heaping on a bit of pressure with that statement about how basically how pathetic he thought the performance was. He didn't use those words. I'm paraphrasing quite liberally. It puts unnecessary pressure, especially after it was their first loss. They'd won both their games at home by bonus point, if I'm not mistaken. So, with that kind of backdrop, you just hope that obviously they don't lose. But Connacht is a difficult place to go searching for victories. It is a ridiculously hard place to do that. Are you muted? X, are you muted?
How did that even happen? I was just sitting here listening to you. No, I'm saying I agree though. Connacht, I was there when the Springboks the 2007 World Cup needed a miracle. A miracle to get over the line, and it was I think it was a Bob Skinstad led almost a B team, but it was still an international Springbok side under Jake White, and I have always had a lot of respect for playing rugby in Galway Bay, and maybe it's because that weather moves over so fast.
It's that weather, yeah. They have
that weather.
4 seasons over the 80 minutes.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So we're not really delving into the ERC right now. We'll certainly do that on Sunday. I just wanted to highlight that one in terms of the Bulls. Stormers, I think, have done well. I had a little chat with Andre Pretorius last week. If you missed it, check it out. And we did touch on the Lions and, their current woes as well. And, of course, we could have used Patrick to talk about the Sharks, but they've had a miserable time as well. So we'll delve into all of those on Sunday. I always look forward to that show. And I love it when you guys ask your questions, so do that then as well. Thanks again to Pat. Sim, I'll see you then.
Yeah.
Cheers, everyone. Welcome back to That Rugby Union Show. Well, what a week it's been.
He's playing like a man possessed.
And so much to talk about. It's not this Rugby Union Show. It's That Rugby Union Show.
So